Hi guys, Jane here, and we are starting Nanoprepmo. I'm gonna do some videos this week about generating ideas, and then from there, I'm hoping to do one week on outlining characters or kind of preparing your characters, and then a week on actual plotting and outlining, because I think that if you want to beat NaNoWriMo, it's really important to go in with a plan. So I want to help you start by figuring out what story do you want to tell. If you are already at the place where you have a lot of ideas, some of these hints might help you flesh out your story before you get all the way to to outlining. But if you don't have a full story or even an idea, this video is definitely for you. So I think that the first thing any new writer who's trying to come up with a story idea should do is to pick a genre, because writing in a genre is so much easier. It tells you the rules that you need to follow and tells you what you need in your book, along with tropes that you can use. It is just so much easier than just a typical fiction novel. So I highly, highly, highly recommend that you write in a genre, at least for NaNoWriMo, to make it a little easier on yourself. Okay, so what genre should you write in? Generally, the genre you read in the most. I am a huge romance fan, so that's generally what I write in. I do write in other genres too, especially because I read pretty widely. So I definitely could write in cozy mystery because I read it, but I wouldn't want to write necessarily like a police procedural. I read in it, but not a lot. So pick the genre that you are A, most interested in, and B, that you want or that you have a lot of experience in. What are you going to know the flow of? Once you pick a genre, you can look at the stories and see what information do I need to figure out what kind of story I want to tell. There are subgenres, and each subgenre tells information about a story. For instance, when you have mysteries, is it a police procedural? Is there a private detective? Is it a cozy mystery? Those are going to be three very different stories, but they're all going to have certain elements in common. They're all going to have probably a murder, definitely a crime of some kind. Somebody is going to solve it, and there's got to be some kind of personal reason for them to want to solve it. And then finally, there's going to be clues along the way, it's going to be solved. So let's say that the book I'm choosing to write is a cozy mystery. I say that because I know a little bit about the genre. So I decide to write a cozy mystery. It's going to be a murder mystery because most of them are. The first thing I know in a cozy mystery that I'm going to need is somebody to solve it. Now, this person in the genre is typically, but not always, a small business owner. They might be somebody who has a bookstore or a bakery or is a writer, something that gives them an into the community. Because if you've read in the cozy genre, they're people who aren't looking at evidence necessarily. They're not doing the CSI thing. They are very much learning about the people involved and deducing who committed the crime based on what they find. Usually not so much physical clues as, oh, this person had a beef with this person, and we unlock the secret of their past. Most, again, but not all, of your main characters for a cozy mystery are female, and a lot of times there is a romantic subplot. Usually somebody in the police, but not always. Like sometimes it's a sergeant, sometimes it's the ME, sometimes it could be even somebody who's a reporter to give her the details that she doesn't currently have. So the first thing I would do is figure out, well, who's my main character? What's her name? What's her age? What's her occupation? And what kind of in does she have for getting information? Once I figure that out, what kind of murder is it? And why is she involved? Is somebody she loves, being blamed for the murder? Is she being blamed for the murder? She has to have some stake in it for a cozy mystery. If you're doing something like a police procedural or a private investigator, they don't have to have as much of a personal stake in it, but I think it helps. If you can have a real personal reason, especially if it's the first book in a series, for them to get involved, I think it makes your book so much stronger. So, the police detective who is chasing somebody who they thought they'd already caught, like a killer who was supposed to be behind bars or dead, and they realize they've got the wrong guy. Something like that. Okay, so with my cozy mystery, then I got to figure out who died. I got to figure out why they died, and I got to then at some point figure out who killed them and what clues I have to lay across the story. Let's switch genres. Let's say I want to do a romance. I know I need to have a couple meet. For the sake of this video, I'm going to say a man and a woman. Obviously, that's not the case with every romance, so whatever works for you. But in this case, a man and a woman. How are they being brought together? Why are they being brought together? What kind of subgenre? Is it paranormal? I write a lot of paranormal. Is it historical? Is it a thriller? Are they both like trying to hunt a madman and fall in love, or are they in danger? Is it, a surprise pregnancy thing where the couple meet in the beginning of the book, conceive a child, or meet before the book, conceive a child, and she shows up at his doorstep with a baby, or he comes back into her life to find that she has a child that is his. Whatever that may be, you can figure out, okay, these are the character names, this is the backstory I want to portray. This is, obviously it has a happily ever after because they all do, but here's how we get there. To give you a little bit of an idea about the one that I'm actually personally doing for NaNoWriMo, I decided to get a little bit out of my comfort zone and do a space opera. And my thought process was, okay, well, what kind of space opera story do I want to tell? I don't read a lot in sci-fi, but I do love stuff like I love Star Trek. I love Stargate. I like Star Wars and stuff. So I knew I wanted something like in space, but not necessarily. I wanted people who were going to different planets, but not who'd started there. And I didn't want to do a military theme. So I decided instead to do colonists. So people who start off at Earth and they are going to colonize the different planet. Okay, why are they going to colonize? And I thought about it and debated my options and decided that I was going to have religious colonists. So people who are leaving Earth because Earth has basically become a godless society, and they're a cult. I created a cult because I thought a cult would be fun. And they're going off into space to try to colonize. Okay, now I have, an element of my story. Then it's a question of, well, who are these people in the cult? What happens along the way? What kind of conflicts can I create that'll create a story? So I do recommend, if you have no ideas, to start there, to start at what genre are you in, and just ask questions along the way until you have a rough mapped out idea. I very much first draft outline everything. My original first outline is always like one sheet of paper. Who are my main characters? What are the real basics of the plot? For the one I'm working on, a husband and wife are religious colonists. They go into space, and along the journey, she gains faith and he loses it. So I'm starting off with them as opposites, and they end up still opposites, which of course affects their relationship and marriage. But all of this is happening while they're trying to colonize or find a planet to colonize. So, figure out the basics of your story. We can get into, when you get to the outline, more of the, okay, this has to happen, and this has to happen, and this has to happen. But just understanding your basics is a pretty important key to, what are you trying to tell? And then you can draw from the tropes that exist already to fill in kind of the gaps. Because again, NaNoWriMo is hard enough. You want to make this as easy as possible, and working with a genre and tropes that are already existing, and writing something that, I don't want to call it cookie cutter because it's not cookie cutter, but it's certainly easier than starting at absolute zero blank page. Then, at least you have the structure. At least you know in a murder mystery, you've got a private detective. You know what you need. You need a private detective or somebody to solve the case. They usually need a partner, if for no other reason than to talk them through it. You've got to have some kind of Sherlock and Watson dynamic, and it doesn't even necessarily have to be a Sherlock and Watson dynamic, but two people at least who can talk about the case. They aren't going to work in a bubble or a vacuum. A lot of times they got to have somebody to get official information from. How did the person die? What's the coroner report? Who are the cops looking at? They have to have a personal stake in things. You have to have clues. You have to have, a killer, and that's just stuff along the way that you're going to need. With a romance, the characters have to meet. They have to fall in love. They're probably going to have a first kiss. If it's not a sweet romance, they're probably going to have a bedroom scene. And they're going to live happily ever after. So, again, by picking a genre, you kind of know some of your story elements. You know the very basics of these things are an integral part of the genre. And then you can go from there with building on that. So, if you're going to use this method of outlining, of idea generation, the first thing I want you to do is to get a piece of paper out, right at the top, your genre. If there's a subgenre, the subgenre. Then figure out the elements that make up the bare minimum of that genre and subgenre. If it's a historical, what time period is it? If it's a historical romance, well, who are the characters? Why are they there? How do they meet? You don't have to know how to get from point A to point B, but at least the basics of who they are. If you're writing in the Civil War, is somebody a soldier? Is somebody a nurse? Is it somebody after the Civil War who has been hurt and is trying to find love, or a widow, maybe with small children, or so many options. But have a starting point, and that's kind of what working with genre for outlining does. All right, I'm going to make some other videos about generating ideas, and then we will go a little bit deeper into what to do with the ideas once you have them. So if this is something that you think will work for you, picking a genre and picking ideas, go for it. And I totally think this is my favorite way to outline a story, or to get the story idea going, is to ask questions based on the genre I'm writing. It's not the only way I do it, but it's a really good way to start, and it opens so many possibilities, and it really allows you to be creative, but within the context of genre. And it's the best way, I think, to be able to write a quick story and an outline and make it flow, because you're not working with infinite possibilities. You are working with the rules and tropes of your specific genre. So I hope I'll see you for the next video. If this has been helpful, hit like. If you'd like more content, hit subscribe, and feel free to leave me a comment below. Thanks, bye.